Hello and welcome you all to another interesting session of Mendel's bicentenary celebrations. I am Anjali Bajaj, a PhD student working with Dr. Sridhar Sivasubbu and Dr. Vinod Skaria at CSIR IGIB Delhi. This year, as we celebrate the 200th birth anniversary of Gregor Mendel, popularly known as the father of genetics, we, the research fellows at CSIR IGIB, have put together an interview series with the scientists and clinicians working in the area of genetics. So in this session of the series, we have with us a very renowned scientist and an excellent teacher, Professor B.K. Thelma from Genetics Department of Delhi University. Since close to 4 decades now, she has immensely contributed in the area of human genetics and medical genomics with a huge translational and societal relevance. In all these years, she has garnered uncountable awards and honors to her name, with most recent being the National Science Chair Award, CNR Rao Lifetime Achievement Award from Karnataka S&T Academy, and Meritorious Service Award from University of Delhi. So she has also been a member of prestigious committees such as Inspire Faculty Selection Committee, UGC FRP Committee, and Scientific Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister. Currently, Professor Thelma is working as a superannotated faculty in Delhi University. So, being a former student at the Department of Genetics, I'm delighted to welcome you, ma'am, for this series. So to begin with, it will be great if you can expand upon your research interest and the areas that your lab focuses on.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Anjali. That was a very elaborate introduction, but we'll go on to answering a few of your things. Yes. So the area of work in my laboratory is broadly on human genetics and medical genomics, an area which is, of considerable contemporary relevance. Okay. Having said that, it's been always a relevant area, but it's just that newer technologies have made things different. So to identify and understand the genetic basis of single gene disorders, okay, as well as complex disorders, the latter, which doesn't follow the Mendelian mode of inheritance, is the primary focus, okay? We work on genetics of brain disorders such as intellectual disability, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, etc. And we use the contemporary approaches of exome sequencing there. And we look at complex disorders, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, where the approaches are slightly different. Now, as you know, the country is very, very rich in terms of patient resource. So using those, we ideally like to discover new, or rather discover disease causal genes using the families which show a very clear-cut mode of inheritance. That's what we call as Mendelian disorders or Mendelian inheritance. And if we have an opportunity, we take forward those discovery leads to do a little bit of functional analysis of that to get some biology understanding. And if we have an opportunity further, we take them on to developing new drug molecules. But what is most important is the minute you identify a genetic lesion in the family, it immediately gets to be of translational value. And that is for diagnostics, okay, not just of a population suspect or individual suspected with that particular condition, but also for prenatal diagnosis in families where this condition may be prevalent. That's on one aspect, the primary discovery genomics and translation wherever possible. We are also interested in doing pharmacogenomics, which is identifying the genetic basis for responders and non-responders to a treatment in different patient groups. We particularly work on schizophrenia and rheumatoid arthritis in this context. Finally, what interests me most at this point of time is, while a lot of progress has been made in genetics and in all kinds of genetic analysis with all of the new technologies, common complex traits, be it cardiovascular diseases or hypertension or diabetes, our understanding, despite expensive and extensive research, has been very limited. And we want to look at, or we have been looking at this particular aspect, exploiting the deep phenotyping principles of Ayurveda to classify individuals into different prakriti groups, which addresses the heterogeneity, which is actually a major factor which limits all the advances in complex traits. We look at that with the genomics approach and hope that we will have some nice new insights into common complex traits, which are typically lifestyle disorders. But at least if you understand the biology of these diseases a little better, we probably have a greater chance of achieving the goals of P4 medicine, even in complex traits.
Thank you, ma'am. That was very interesting and relevant at the same time, given the number of people who are affected by these complex disorders. Now, since you have always been tackling and solving the real life genetic puzzles, carrying out your research in families affected by genetic disorders, how, in your opinion, Mendel's discoveries have impacted your research, and why were they actually important?
Okay. So if I have to answer this question in just one sentence, I'll say that Mendel's principles, be it inheritance, be it segregation, be it independent assortment, is actually the bread and butter of all discovery genome scientists. Okay, and the same is true with me too. So to elaborate this a little bit more, when we utilize this basic knowledge or the principles which were laid very early on and which haven't really changed the way we look at Mendelian disorders in particular, that's really the secret of success for all genome scientists. And methodologies early on were very different. We have greater technologies now, but I must say that right from the study design to data analysis, identification of the classical or the disease causal variant detection, these still remain the guiding principles. Okay, and I may also add that this is not true only for protein coding variants which are causing diseases. It's also emerging to be true for regulatory variants which are responsible for single gene disorders, which is like new evidence which is coming. So that's one reason which you already know that why or how the Mendelian principles have actually impacted and continue to impact. So having said that, I must say that this is true only for Mendelian disorders, and these principles haven't really kind of helped us too much for common complex traits. Okay, secondly, these principles, when you say in practice, for me, it means translation. So surely the same principles hold true even when you talk about disease causal variant carrier detection, either in the affected families or in populations, for example, and also for routine confirmatory diagnostic testing and predictive testing in prenatal settings. So you will appreciate that the principles of Mendel laid that many years ago, okay, although he worked on a completely different system, it has actually impacted all science and the science of it, the science of this discipline, as well as the major societal relevance it has had in terms of genetics in health and disease. That's what I would say is the
that was
most
very
important.
insightful, ma'am. Yeah. So, ma'am, what do you think will be the future, like the biggest burning question or the future in the human genetics field?
Okay.
Now,
You
since
want me
lot
to
of
kind of
NGS data is coming up, and we are sequencing a lot more genomes now. But what do you think is
yeah.
the biggest thing that we should focus on in?
I thought I'll actually come to this question once I would explain to you a little bit more about, why does one want to study genetics? But I think, that will be like a very relevant thing at this point to first understand why study genetics and then go into, what should be the thing in future. So, do you agree?
Yeah,
Because I think, if
right.
you're wanting to do that, you really need to kind of understand why we study genetics. So
Correct.
if I have to answer this question myself, what I will do is I'll turn around and ask you, why does one learn alphabets? a child anyway learns to speak very early on and can move on with life happily. Okay. But why does one invest time in learning alphabets, learning words, learning sentences, and so on? So you know that there is much more. The answer is clear to you right away. Okay. And genetics is therefore in the same ball game, or it's very, very similar. It's not just the science of heredity, which was believed very early on, but it is a lot more. Okay. And for saying a lot more, what I would like to actually say is that, it is a very, very fundamental science, which has got major implications in our everyday being. So you don't even have to learn genetics. You can actually see it in and around you all the time. Okay. So, but on a more serious note, what I'd like to say is it's the essence of our life, not just of humans, but of plants, animals, microbes, and so on. It's, as I said, a very, very integral part and undisputable area for societal relevance. Okay, and over the years, its classical definition may have changed, but I think in the context of today's genetics, it is the basis of health and disease. It's the basis of form and function. It's the basis of evolution and population migrations. If you talk about any area, it's all just there. Okay, and genetics and society, of course, is the ultimate. So in this context, I really want to tell you, why would we really want to look at genetics, or why should anybody know about genetics at all? It reminds me of a classical textbook story of a German farmer, okay, where everybody believed like begets like. This is classical textbook stuff. So the farmer had two sons. The older boy was nice and strong, just like himself, and the second boy was really a weakling. So the father always believed that the second child was not really his. So he went to the German court, and I'm talking about several decades ago, where only blood grouping was possible. Doing the blood group analysis, it showed up that the second child, who was a weakling, was more likely to be his own son, and only 1,000th of a chance that the older son was his. So we know how much genetics, understood or not understood, even with the limited techniques which were available in those days, were influencing individuals, families, societies, and so on. Okay, so it's not an esoteric science, but it is really a science which impacts human health, medicine, agriculture, animal breeding, and a lot more. Okay, so with all the advanced technologies, of course, it's become very informative, but principles and paradigms have largely remained the same. So that's really, to answer why we would really want to study genetics, or why is study of genetics important at all. Yeah. So now you want me to answer a specific question on
the future of human genetics.
The future. Okay. The future of human genetics.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with, I've just explained, whatever I've told you is really about how genetic findings impact maybe individuals or families. And at the population level, we said complex traits, we have not really kind of made a mark or a dent on those yet at the moment. But really speaking, if we look at the Mendelian disorders in particular and its relevance, okay, for public health, for example, okay, where are we in the utilization of Mendelian principles in public health? Where have we lacked? Where is the difficulty? Okay, so when I talk about that, the first and foremost thing, a large group, over 600 disorders, fall into the classical Mendelian disorders, or with the autosomal recessive mode of inheritance called the inborn errors of metabolism. Right? Now, these inborn errors of metabolism, you may or may not know the genes which are responsible for this group of disorders. For a few we know, for a few we don't know. But the beauty is that you can do a screening of a newborn for a metabolite deficiency or alteration, and can actually put the child on treatment. for a large number of these conditions, treatment is available. And therefore, in other words, you can prevent the manifestation of a disease in later life or in early childhood itself. So this is a classical example where we say that, this is something which should be made. If newborn screening is possible, it should actually be made mandatory in a country like ours, where every newborn can be screened depending on what we know about the incidence of the disease and so on, which is going to be, of course, state specific, region specific, and population subgroup specific, and so on. But this is something which should be done at the public health level. Unfortunately, in our country, we don't have it as a mandatory policy for newborn screening, even for the most common conditions. So that's something which I feel should be done. The second and the most important thing that I feel where, where the science should go is, with so much of major strides in discovery genomics, for example, okay, we are really, we are able to get better insights into disease biology. Okay, we definitely have a greater insight into disease biology. We understand pathways, we understand the crosstalks between them, and therefore, while a cure may not be possible for all of these disorders, because you may not have all the genes which are known, or when you have the genes, you may have the test, but still everybody doesn't have accessibility to test. So in the paradigm that, we talk about the central dogma in medical biology, where you say it is genetic diagnosis of prediction, prevention, cure, and treatment. Okay, while prediction and prevention may not have been possible in a particular case, you would like to have a cure. If you don't have a cure, at least a treatment is what you would like. So with all the knowledge that is accumulating, with all of the big data which is coming in, if there is a way that we can actually put efforts to make genes to medicines, in other words, development of new therapeutics, could be one big area where one could take forward all of this knowledge which is accumulating. For the classical example, simple diagnostic tests, which is, a small PCR based one, or routine test is good enough. But where these things are missed and where treatment then becomes imminent, I think newer therapeutics are something which are very important. In that context, I'll come to the next aspect of therapeutics. We talk about a lot about gene therapy, and today we talk about really the genome editing, okay, which is, so before I say anything more there, I want to actually tell you about ethical, legal, and social issues, which have always had the prime place in human genetics and medical genomics, okay? Given that, in today's context, we have major technological advancements, including ability to do the genome editing with CRISPR-Cas9, or maybe, newer techniques will come and so on. So while that could be a possibility, and there's a lot of effort to use this as a curative measure, let's say for somatic diseases or in somatic cells for some of the diseases, the heritable human genome editing, in other words, germline genome editing, should actually be tread with a lot of caution, because this may be a danger of taking the science of genetics and the technologies that you asked about, taking them too far, because in other words, we may be just taking human evolution in our own hands, which I would really caution, or we say that we should tread with caution when it comes to this particular aspect. So techniques are advancing, technologies are all over the place. It's also being accessible to a lot of the population, but we should be very careful as scientists what we would do, whether we are really we respect the ethical, legal, and the social implications of this, and not really make the mistake of the earlier eugenics practice, which was there very, very early on. So that's something which I would say. Having said that, I'll say genetics has always been a very controversial discipline, okay? It's always been, and it will continue to be so, okay? But I think the benefits of this fascinating and yet not completely understood science should certainly be reaped for societal good. So that's the way I look at the future of genetics. Science will go on, research will go on, technologies will develop, but we should be very careful in what we give to the public, okay, in a very responsible manner. So that's what I have to say.
Thanks a lot, ma'am, for such extensive answer and pointing out such relevant topics uh, that we do not really talk about much. At last, I'll just ask you that what will be your message for the younger students who are very keen on studying genetics and who are deciding to choose science as their lifelong career. So, what would be your message or motivation for them?
Yeah, I mean, all that I've said in the last few minutes should itself kind of tell them the passion that I have for genetics and genetics research, because I said it's the be all and do all. Okay. I mean, it's such a fundamental science, and there is so much. I also said towards the end, it is still not completely understood. So, like earlier we said, there are 100 reasons. I always use this in my talks. There are 100 reasons to be a biologist. I would tell prospective young students who are wanting to take genetics that there are 1,000 reasons for you to pursue genetics, because the more you delve into, the more hidden, the more secrets are unraveled. And you don't know where all this information will go. A, for knowledge sake, B, actually for translation, for health. Because at the end of the day, we're all anthropocentric in all our, exercises. So if you really want to get the best out in just about all spheres, I think because genetics is, it is the essence of life. And therefore, I think there's so much promise. And of course, innovations, like say, for example, you need to be able to pick up new tools which might answer questions which have also always been challenging. For example, like what I'm saying for genomics, it's a new science altogether. Okay, but we think that the ancient science will have a validation. So, like that, newer areas will come out. Many things will come out. So, for the students, I can only tell you that you'll never ever be disappointed. Each day is new, and especially in genetics. And you don't know which new variant you will find, which new disease causal gene you will find, what new diseases. If 25% of diseases are still not explained at all, we say about 6 to 8% is single gene disorders, 6 to 8% is complex, the chromosomal disorders, another 60% is complex disorders. What about the remaining 25%? Okay, so you know how much more is there in stock for young researchers who are passionate about this field of genetics.
I think that is more than enough to, instill the sense of love for the genetics. And I think it will be very helpful for the younger students. Now they can make a very informed choice. Uh, Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot for your time today. And thank you for your insights and opinions about the field that you are working on since about 4 decades now. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Anjali. Thank you for this opportunity. Okay.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And I wish all the younger generation great success, a great success in their research, in their pursuit of their passion, whatever it be. Do well in whatever you do. What you do is not important. How you do is important, right? So that. Okay. So thank you again.